I was researching recent online articles and videos and found that many suggest Ukraine can win in 2025. We know that the outcome of any conflict depends on numerous complex factors, including military capabilities, political support, economic conditions, and international dynamics. While it is not possible to definitely state that Ukraine cannot win its war with Russia, it does seem futile to continue. But why? Now, before you get triggered, let me be clear that I want to present this information in an objective manner, and I even did another video that runs counterpoint to this one, so that all sides can be analyzed. So go and also check that one out, and keep it civil, and try not to get all fanboy on me. So with that, here's my top 5 reasons why Ukraine can win in 2025. Number 1, logistical and territorial challenges. We have to first wrap our heads around what winning the war actually means. In other words, what are the goals of Volodymyr Zelensky and his military command for Ukraine? And what do the people of Ukraine actually want? Zelensky has consistently expressed his desire to reclaim territories occupied by Russia, including the Crimea and parts of the Donbass region. That means that Ukraine's stated goal for winning the war is to regain the Russian-occupied territories through military or diplomatic means. Yet in the last few weeks and months, he has acknowledged the current military limitations in achieving this goal solely through military force. In fact, in a recent interview, Zelensky stated, "We do not have the strength to recover them," and that he would be willing to cede territory to Russia in exchange for NATO protection, emphasizing the need for diplomatic pressure from the international community to compel Russia to negotiate. In spite of all the billions of dollars in military and humanitarian aid that has been pumped into Ukraine, the modern multinational equipment and training given to its military to make a stand throughout the long front lines, Ukraine is unable to mount any large-scale or sustained wide-front offensive to actually liberate any of the Russian-occupied territories. Even with the incursions into the Kursk area in the last couple of months and other pinpricks here and there, these operations have not been large enough to make any substantial gains in the overall strategic footing of the war in Ukraine. We also must look at the very difficult logistical issues facing Ukraine. Their supply lines through the Black Sea are essentially cut off, and air transport is unfeasible, leaving the only means to get supplies to Kiev and beyond to the front lines through rail lines and roadways from Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. Number 2, military disparity. The military disparity between Ukraine and Russia, at least on paper, appear to give Russia a significant advantage. But we must also consider that Russia has a larger territory to defend, particularly along China's borders, just in case. We can see in tanks and aircraft, Ukraine is outnumbered, even with arguably more modern equipment from the US and Western countries. But more concerning is the number of reported Ukrainian deserters. Different independent sources place these between 40,000 and 100,000 soldiers, with one article from France 24 showing a tired 45-year-old Ukrainian soldier who has been fighting with little rest for nearly 3 years. If we consider the numbers reported, that means that 1 out of every 10 trained soldiers are no longer willing to fight. This has a devastating effect on morale for those that remain to hold off the Russians. Zelensky admitting in December of 2024 that the number killed was approximately 43,000. In spite of these Ukrainian casualties, we must also consider that Russia has lost an estimated 600,000 killed or wounded. In the bloodiest month ever, November 2024, Russia lost some 46,000 troops alone. Number 3, geopolitical and strategic challenges. The war, now nearly 3 years old, has already drained Ukraine's manpower, limited resources, and especially the morale of many of its soldiers, as seen with the larger number of deserters previously mentioned. The only way Ukraine has been able to continue the fight has been through international military and humanitarian aid, primarily coming from the United States. With the U.S. elections now getting ready to shift to President Trump, who has vowed to end the war through diplomatic means, and perhaps curtail the outgoing aid, Ukraine is facing a dynamic shift in geopolitics. On Russia's part, we have seen their use of Iranian-made drones, Chinese and North Korean weapons and supplies, the Wagner Group, and now even North Korean troops on the ground. In contrast, Ukraine has increasingly relied on U.S. and Western countries supplying billions of dollars in modern military equipment, logistical support, and military training. To avoid any international outrage, the U.S. has maintained its training bases outside of Ukraine. And also, many foreign fighters from the U.S., Britain, France, and other countries had volunteered to fight in Ukraine. Russia has consistently threatened the use of nuclear weapons if directly attacked. Back in November of 2024, Reuters News reported that Russia had fired a new hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, known as the Oreshnik missile. This is the first use of a ballistic missile, and it is widely known that the Oreshnik can be armed with nuclear warheads. This attack signals Russia's dominance over airspace in Ukraine. Even with the latter receiving 6 U.S.-made ATACMS batteries, it is clear that Russia can strike just about anywhere in Ukraine. In contrast, Ukraine has fought a mostly defensive air and missile war, and only in the last few months has it launched missiles and drones against deeper Russian targets. Russia's nuclear capabilities is what keeps the U.S. and Western countries from putting troops on the ground to fight alongside Ukraine, and ultimately it will be the strongest diplomatic card for Putin to play if peace negotiations commence. Number 4, economic constraints. Ukraine's economy has suffered significantly due to the war, making it heavily dependent on international financial and military aid. Its only viable port in Odessa has limited access and not a reliable source for supplies due to Russia's naval dominance in the Black Sea. The country has relied heavily on U.S. and Western countries providing humanitarian and financial aid. It is near impossible to continue to conduct an effective war with an infrastructure that has been destroyed and prone to Russia's air dominance, even despite many of the downed Russian aircraft, missiles, and drones. It is this limited infrastructure that further prevents Ukraine from mounting any realistic counteroffensive aimed at recapturing its lost territory. Finally, Ukraine's main source of income was agricultural products, which accounted for 41% of the country's overall exports in 2021. Yet, its export value has been reduced by 30 to 50% without its full use of its Black Sea ports. And without any sustainable agricultural export industry, Ukraine's economy will continue to erode, increasing poverty within the country and further preventing any protracted war effort. And finally, number 5, shifting international support. As we touched upon in some of the earlier points, the U.S. elections in November will bring a new administration under President Trump this month. What changes might be made to continued military and economic aid remains to be seen. However, we can look at an overall shift in international support, which has cost the U.S. and many Western countries billions of dollars with no end in sight to the conflict. The military aspects of the war have degraded into mostly a war of attrition, reminiscent of World War I's trench warfare, with neither sides making any substantial territory gains in the last 12 to 18 months.
Map
in fact,
animation,
we can look at the 10-month-old
get a better
battle
sense of the
Bakhmut,
battle area by
which gave the
observing
Russians
the height
a mere
differences
30 to 40 kilometers deep territory gain around the city for the loss of over 100,000 Russian casualties in that campaign alone. The Ukrainian army has made some advances in the Kursk province area, which are proving to be short-term gains as the Ukrainians are squeezed out by Russian counteroffensives. Not all allies of Ukraine prioritize the same outcomes for the war, which can lead to potential fractures in international unity. Germany and Poland have already made cutbacks in military and financial aid to Ukraine, with Germany cutting its support by almost half to 4 billion euros. And Poland having cut military supplies in order to arm their own military. Therefore, without any meaningful counterattack or offensive actions taken by the Ukrainian army, the international community may be reassessing its continued financial support of the war as Western nations and populations grow weary of providing continuous support, especially if economic or political pressures increase at home. So here's my conclusions. Ukraine cannot win the war alone with its military and will either need to negotiate a peace settlement or cause an escalation of war that drags the United States and other nations into a direct conflict. Essentially, a third world war with all its real implications and dangers of a nuclear exchange. In spite of Russia's casualties, Ukraine is also losing a large number of soldiers to combat losses and more recently to desertion, as the military and the population become weary of the long war. The international community will not allow a scenario of an escalation of war and push for a diplomatic pathway for Ukraine and Russia to come to a settlement. Hit the like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And don't forget, there's another side to the story, so check out my other video, Russia Can't Win in 2025. Until next time, see ya.